Hey there. Okay, so we're getting back into HTML, CSS, JavaScript in the next set of videos here. We're doing stuff that's a little bit more advanced, but also actually a little easier as long as you've got to understand some of the basics that are going on. So what we've done so far is we've built everything from scratch. We wrote the HTML, we wrote the CSS, we wrote the JavaScript, all from scratch, not using any kind of like additional helper things. So now what we're going to look at is some of the helper things that exist out there. Because a lot of times when you're building a site, you don't want to have to do it from scratch. You can if you're really into that, but a lot of times there's just like really, really basic small things that you'll forget about. You know, like, oh, making something work exactly just right in a special type of browser or a special type of mobile device, or just little things that you wouldn't even think about that exist out there, or just special situations where you wouldn't really want to have to run in and fix all that yourself. Now, also, you might not want to have to build everything yourself every time. Probably over time, what would happen as you built lots of sites is you would start building up like a kind of personal bank of CSS that you just pull and drop into projects at different times for some basic layout stuff. So these kind of big banks of CSS and HTML that can be dropped into a project exist out there. It's a whole thing that already exists that can help you like quickly put together a template for a site. We're going to look at a couple of these. A few of them exist out there, but these are really, really helpful from a web developer point of view to be able to build a site without having to write tons and tons and tons of CSS. This takes care of kind of the whole base for you, and then you can just write little customization things, changing colors, changing shadows, changing backgrounds, little things to make it your own site, but using a lot of like best practices when it comes to laying stuff out and some basic interface elements like buttons and things like that. So these are called frameworks. They're called CSS frameworks. They also include a lot of HTML. You don't have a CSS framework that has no HTML. Because there's all this classes and IDs and stuff that kind of get tied together. And there's a lot of them out there. We're going to look at two. We're just going to go over them and basic idea of them. And then in the next lessons, we're going to start actually implementing these because these are really, really useful and they're things that you're going to want to use when you build your sites. So just to get a quick idea of what this is like, my basic site here, my little Victor Temprano site, is built using a framework. I didn't code this background gray area or the size of this header or the size of all this different stuff or the color of the links. And this column stuff here, I didn't actually have to code that. There's just built-in classes that I can tell this HTML to have that when I include the CSS from my framework, it just splits it up into the right kind of columns that work across all devices and screen sizes. Even here with this kind of like quotes stuff, there's this cool little left bar. I didn't code that at all. I just dropped it in using one of these frameworks. So it made it so that this site ended up taking me like all of half an hour to make, instead of if I had tried to write all this CSS and HTML myself, it probably would have taken a few hours, even though it's really simple, just to do all this little tiny detail work. So you can see these sites as you can see these frameworks as basically a whole bunch of building blocks that you can drop in. Now I built this site using Bootstrap, which is like the most popular, I mean, it even says it on their little thing, the most popular HTML, CSS, and JS library in the world. I mean, okay, whatever. But it's very, very popular. It's been around for a long time. We're talking like a decade or more here. And it's used all over the web. In fact, when we go look at some of the themes or some of the examples of Bootstrap, you probably recognize some of this, like these type of buttons, because you've probably just seen them on the internet before. This kind of layout or this kind of header, you might recognize that because that's really commonly used by developers. So there are different elements that this gives us. We can even see it in these examples. There's like a navigation bar here. And again, it's got a footer that can stick to the bottom of the page. There's things like sign-in pages that do all this layout, and you could just go to this HTML and there it all is. And then as long as you have Bootstrap, yours will just look the same. So, okay, we're going to be going over this in a bit more detail. I'm just giving an overview of what this is. And then there's another one out here that's newer that I haven't really used much yet. I think I've used it once, called Bulma. It's pretty cool too. It's up there as one of the top ones these days. And you can see some templates that people have built with it here. It's not, you know, like you can see the nav menu is a little different. The default font is different. The buttons are slightly different. It's not like this completely different world, but you can see there's some difference in some of the layout situations going on. So it's kind of fun. You can pick the building blocks that you want to use to build your site. So let's look. We're going to be using Bootstrap just because it is kind of the classic one, but the basic principles of how we use it are going to apply across any framework that you're going to choose because they're all built on the same basic idea. So when we go to the Bootstrap documentation, we're going to see on the left-hand side lots and lots of stuff here. We have to scroll down a bit, but once we go down, we can see there's stuff about containers, a grid. We've looked at grid, columns, and then as we go down further, there's forms. And down here in the components, this is some really good stuff. There's things like, let's see if there's buttons. I believe there's buttons here. Here are the buttons. So it tells you, oh, this is what you put for your HTML for the button. And you don't have to worry about what you should put for the CSS, because if you've just included the Bootstrap CSS, which we're going to do in the next video, it'll just look right. And then they tell you here, oh, if you want a button that's blue, you give it this button primary class. If you want a secondary button, you give it the secondary class, and so on. It becomes really easy to do this styling instead of having to like manually write all this. There's also a bunch of other stuff. There's things like drop down. So this gives you just so many little things you can do, like this little button type menu. There's things called modals, which are pretty cool. So these, can we actually get one to open? Yeah, a demo modal. It's like this pop-up type of thing you've probably seen before. And there's just lots of them. Like go look through, check out the different stuff, and you start getting ideas for how like to put these pieces together to build your own site. There's also stuff within the columns and a grid. So you can have, it shows you like how to have this whole column layout, and you don't have to worry at all about that whole display grid and learning the whole CSS grid if you just want to use Bootstrap to like make your column layouts using their classes. And there's some examples, and it gets complicated and all that sort of stuff. We're not going to go over it in huge detail, but we're going to do it in a basic way to get a feel for this. There's also, which we're not going to go over just right now, we're going to focus on the CSS HTML in the next couple of videos, but after that we're going to come back and also do some JavaScript. And there's some special JavaScript that's included in something like Bootstrap. Like for instance, this accordion, which opens different elements like this. And you can see that must be using some kind of JavaScript to do this interactivity with the page. And yeah, so it includes this, and you just have to, again, set up the stuff with HTML, and it's all pre-built with Bootstrap to know, as long as you follow along with how they did the HTML, it'll work, which is just really, really cool. And again, adds a lot to your overall functionality on your page. One of the really important parts of this too is that it will break down mobile and desktop. One of the biggest things that we run into in web development is that when we build something, we're generally on a desktop computer. We make it look nice with a browser that is kind of this shape. And then on a phone, it's like, oh crap, it doesn't work at all. You've seen websites that aren't optimized for mobile, and they're a nightmare. So the nice thing is that there's some special CSS where you say, oh, if the screen width is this much, then do the layout this way. And that way, and when you do that, you can change the layout of the website at different screen sizes. So normally, if you were to code this all yourself, it's a big pain in the butt. You have to make all these things for the different possible screen sizes and what are the layouts. The nice thing about Bootstrap and things like this is they're just built to do that already. So when you have, for instance, these columns, they are just going to break down in different sizes of screen. So normally they might be side by side, but as soon as you look on a mobile, they're one on top of the other. And you didn't have to do any of the work behind it. So hopefully that gives you some good sense of like why we're going to use these frameworks, why they're important. And now we're going to go back to the calculator and try loading in Bootstrap and try like applying some of these styles and see how it works to spruce it up or change it around a little. So I'll see you in the next video.